Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Lucas Alexander to dominate Jeka Saragi. He's going to dominate him. And I'm here to talk about UFC Fight Night, Allen versus Craig. And I will start with that fight, and I will end up with Rafael Ramos Estevam versus Charles Johnson, which will be the main event of this video. All right. Brendan Allen dominates Paul Craig. I thought this was a very impressive performance. Picture perfect for Brendan Allen. He showed to be dangerous everywhere. Had Paul Craig briefly hurt on the feet, but mainly he went through him on the ground. And that's impressive enough anyway with anybody going through him like that in a UFC main event. But for Paul Craig, that's one of the most dangerous guys on his back in the whole UFC. You've got your Charles Oliveira's out there and whatever, but Paul Craig is one of the best, and certainly in the heavier divisions, he's the best. But here in round 3, he was the guy that was within 30 seconds or whatever. The fight ended in 30 seconds into round 3. Right away he was taken down, and he got up and said, fuck this, and put himself at risk and left his neck exposed, and that's when he got choked. And that wasn't him looking for a way out of the fight. That was him looking for a way out of the position. And this is a guy who choked out Magomed Ankalaev with 1 second left from his back. Choked out Kennedy Nzechukwu with the same move, the triangle choke in round 3. He's somebody who thrives down the stretch off his back because he's totally dangerous there. But here he felt the top game of Brendan Allen, which is one of the best top games in the UFC. Brendan Allen is violent. He advances with position and gets more violent as he advances. He's got really good control, comfortable taking your back, of course, which is all part of the top position, and really dangerous with submissions as well. And, of course, the best top game submission is the rear naked choke. And he's got a killer rear naked choke. And here he went through Paul Craig with a rear naked choke. I don't even know if he had positions with his legs, if he had both hooks in. I'm pretty sure he didn't. But he turned a corner and got that neck with a good angle on it, just on the neck, and then secured the position and the submission in a second or two. He's really fucking strong, really physical. I thought he won the physicality battle pretty quickly here. And he was too big of a force for Paul Craig on top. And, of course, on the feet, I thought he was much more dangerous, even though that's where Brendan Allen has been finished twice in the UFC. That's where he's lost. But he's still a young, healthy kid, 27 or whatever he is. I have a little bit of doubts about some durability issues and whatever, but I wouldn't say he's got a bad chin at all. I would be really anxious to see him fight Sean Strickland or Chris Curtis or fucking Israel Adesanya or whoever. I think the world of Brendan Allen as a fighter. I think Paul Craig is awesome too. You need your Paul Craigs out there. He is a unique fighter in the UFC, very exciting, and I was thrilled to see him get his first main event here. But Brendan Allen is the future, no doubt about it. I mean, he's much younger as well and whatever, and he's got a brighter future just naturally, but he is a force at middleweight and wherever the hell he ends up. Guy's a very good fighter, really good striker, underrated of course, but that's just because he's so good on the ground. And here he declared himself maybe the best threat on the ground by taking out Paul Craig and Andre Muniz in a couple of fights here. But Brendan Allen is awesome, and I'm really happy to see him get a destructive victory like that. That was one hell of a main event. Not so much as a fight, but still, it was a thorough beatdown, and a star was born, or whatever the fuck. Next up, we got Michael Morales, speaking of stars being born, versus Jake Matthews. This was not domination. I thought Michael Morales won all 3 rounds, but I thought it was very close, very competitive. I would have been really surprised and declared a bad decision if he lost the decision, but it was still very close. Jake Matthews was very much in that fight. I just thought he was a step behind at range, and Michael Morales uses his range very well, and he throws fucking bombs. And power wins decisions often, and that's what happens. That's what happened here, and that's what happens with Michael Morales. He is comfortable fighting 15 minutes, shows to have good energy. There were a few moments there where it looked like Jake was turning it up, and it could have been one of those veteran takes over situations, and Michael Morales got right back into things and took over the fight. I thought he had control pretty much throughout. I thought he won all 3 rounds, but I still thought it was close. You know, Jake Matthews was very much in this fight, and he made it a great test for Michael Morales, who at whatever years of age, he's very young, passed this test with flying colors. And Jake, he's not one of these 35-year-old veterans or whatever. He's still, you know, a young enough guy himself, where he's in his prime right now, and a very good, well-versed fighter, and particularly durable. And while Michael Morales wasn't able to finish him, he was able to go 15 hard minutes and be a step ahead of a very solid welterweight. So a great win for Michael Morales. And that brings me to Chase Hooper, speaking of great victories. Chase Hooper, rear naked choke over Jordan Levitt. This was a fun fight for two minutes or something. It was not long at all, but it was very fun. There were a lot of exchanges on the ground, a few different submissions attempted, and exchanging positions. And then Jordan Levitt fell into a trap from Chase Hooper, who took his back and choked him out pretty quickly. Chase, I did think, was better in a jiu-jitsu sense, but there were still a lot of little, X factors going into this one. I thought there was a chance Jordan Levitt wins with the physicality advantage, which is always a possibility with Chase Hooper. But Chase is stronger than he looks, even though he looks pretty strong. And he is definitely as technical as he looks. And he was able to trap Jordan Levitt and tap him out. He got it done via rear naked choke. Just the second time Jordan's been submitted. First one was by Paddy Pimblett via second round rear naked choke. But here Chase Hooper proved to be way above him with jiu-jitsu, because they were battling. It wasn't some striking fest, even though Chase came out of the gate looking to make it one, I think. And they were rolling. It was a fun rolling session for 2 minutes, and Chase trapped him. He was much better. And Chase is particularly dangerous, and the guy gets it done in round 1 on pure technique. I thought in this one, if he was going to get a finish, I thought it would be later on, second or third round, as I think most Chase Hooper victories will be in the future. But here he just got it done with technique, going jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu with Jordan Levitt. Great fucking victory, and for Jordan Levitt, this sucks. Makes him look a little more vulnerable on the ground, having two losses like this in a short period of time. But again, Chase Hooper's a guy that is not respected the way he should be, and I think he's going to be gaining more respect, and this loss will get better with age. That brings me to Peyton Talbot, taking out Nick Aguirre via rear naked choke in round 3. And this was a great victory for Peyton. I thought he's one of those youngsters that just naturally seems like he's susceptible to getting exposed in one way or another by a more seasoned fighter. Not that Nick Aguirre is that, but still, being exposed by somebody who's got some tricks up his sleeve and something he's not prepared for. And here I thought it could be the case where Nick Aguirre is that guy who's able to take him down and control him. And Nick Aguirre did that and did a great job doing that, but he only had 1 round of control in him. Peyton Talbot had third round energy, took over the fight in round 2. I thought Nick Aguirre was lost in round 2. I knew it was a losing effort. I thought maybe he can crack him, hurt him badly, and win a round or something, but that's it. The control-wise, he took that away from Nick Aguirre after round 1, and Peyton Talbot was in control, beating him up, and eventually secured the finish in round 3, putting him on his ass. Great victory for Peyton Talbot. Nice for him to get a submission victory as well, because I thought, and I do think moving forward, most of his finishes will be TKOs. But he's a young, versatile kid with a lot of good traits about him as a fighter, and he showed him here against Nick Aguirre. Again, dropping round 1, that takes a lot of energy from you, even though it's not like he was working frantically from his back. But he kept himself alive, tamed his opponent, and secured a third round finish, which is always most impressive. And by the way, we saw a good amount of them here in this on this fight card, starting with the main event, or finishing with the main event, I guess. But speaking of which, that gets me to the next third round finish, which was Amanda Ribas taking out Luana Pinheiro via round 3 TKO, spinning wheel kick, and pounded her out. I thought this was similar to Peyton Talbot versus Nick Aguirre, but much more of a test for Amanda Ribas because she was beaten up in round 1. I thought Luana Pinheiro did a great job. I think she was up against it physically against Amanda Ribas, although I thought her judo could have kept her safe positionally, and it did at points. But she was up against it physically against Amanda Ribas, and she just came out like the Tasmanian devil and knew Amanda Ribas is vulnerable. 3 of her losses come by TKO, 3 of her 4 losses. She's got a weaker chin than most for female flyweights or whatever, and Luana went after her, and she cracked her a bunch, busted her face up, rocked her chin a few times where I thought, oh, this is it, and won the round. But after that, Amanda Ribas regained herself, gained her composure, and came out and took over the fight instantly in round 2, and she did so on the feet. I thought she was beating Luana up much better from the outside, mixing up a lot of different attacks, using the kicks, as I think Dominic Cruz or Paul Felder was pointing out and pointed out to me. But it was the difference maker, and that was a really good turn for Amanda Ribas. I thought she took over the fight then and there, but for her to get the third round finish and do so in such flashy fashion was the total cherry on top of the MMA Veteran Sunday or whatever. But it was a great victory for Amanda Ribas. She tamed the youngster in Luana Pinheiro, who has looked really good so far. I know the Michelle Wooderson fight was close, but still she walked away with a nod there. And here, she wasn't going to get the nod, I think, in any way, even though she did take Amanda Ribas down early in round 3, I believe, and found some control. But it was still Amanda Ribas' fight to lose, and instead of losing it or leaving it up to be lost, she secured the finish by beating her up with some wild shit down the end. So, great win for Amanda Ribas. Tough loss for Luana Pinheiro, but altogether a great battle. You know, I love when the veteran wins, aside from when she cost me fucking money. You bitch. Miktabek Orolbai beats Uros Medic. This did not cost me money because I was fearful enough of this guy to not bet on him. To not bet on Uros Medic, even though my pick was officially Uros Medic wins, a decision. But Miktabek Orolbai, this guy, he is a, you know, I don't want to say he's Khabib or whatever, but he is a fucking dangerous, well-versed guy. And I want to say my favorite part of this fight was listening to Dominic Cruz slowly come to the realization that he was wrong about this guy being a striker. If you go rewatch the fight, he starts it off, he's like, this guy is a pure striker. Pure striker. Never stepped on the wrestling mats in his life. And then 2 minutes later, you know, they're on the ground. He's like, this guy, for a guy that's never even thought about wrestling, he actually hit a pretty good takedown. I got to give it to him for a guy that's never even thought about wrestling. But he's still a striker. And a few minutes later, he's like, this guy, I'm telling you, he should try wrestling. That's how good he's doing. And then in the end, he was like, this guy should be wearing a singlet because he's a wrestler, born and bred. Just fucking hilarious. But he looked really good, Miktabek Orolbai. He was given a little trouble in the first minute, I think, by Uros Medic, who made the most of UFC jitters and whatever, trying to catch him cold. I thought he put on some nice offense in the first minute, but that was it. And that might have been it for the striking. I think Miktabek Orolbai said, yeah, let's advance to the wrestling part of the game plan. Took him down, grounded him out, sucked some of the life out of him, and choked him out in round 2. Or cranked his face or whatever. But it was a dominant performance from Miktabek Orolbai, again, despite that early flurry. And he's a guy who said he wants to go back down to lightweight. He did used to fight at lightweight. And for him to do this to a thriving, surging UFC youngster, or whatever Uros Medic would be in your mind, This was very impressive. Very, very impressive. I mean, this guy did look smaller, but he didn't let Euros overwhelm him. He certainly looked tough when he needed to look tough. And then he just looked superior for the rest of the fight. And Euros Medic, he's a guy who he's been taken down and whatever, but not too much. His wrestling is really held up, his anti-wrestling. And here in this fight, there were a lot of X factors and whatever, him taking this fight on short notice. But Miktabek Orolbai, I think, proved to be a far and away better fighter here. I don't think he got lucky. I think this guy was UFC bound anyway. And here he made no dispute about it, or whatever the expression would be, if I knew how to use the English language. But great debut, tough loss for Medic. This guy was, go watch my video. I was telling you, he's going to knock out Johnny Parsons or whatever. I thought he was going to beat Johnny Parsons pretty comfortably. I don't know about a knockout, but I thought he was definitely going to win. And then here with this guy, an X Factor, taking this fight on a few days' notice, it was such a different matchup where it had me second-guessing everything. And tough loss for Medic. This really sucked. Shitty circumstances. That is one big glare. I'm going to try to crowd the glare. All right. Here's one I got totally wrong. Joanderson Brito choking out Jonathan Pearce in round 2. I thought I was about to get it completely right, too. After Jonathan Pearce survived and even won round 1, in my opinion. Although I'd have to rewatch it. It was very close. But he was pressuring Joanderson Brito, who is a first-round monster, and in the future will be a first-round monster. That's what he is. But Joanderson Brito choked him out in round 2 after things were going horribly for him in round 2. He was taken down in 3 seconds and was controlled throughout the whole fight, the whole round. But he got up and he found that ninja choke, which I think the ninja choke, I know we've had a few high-profile ninja chokes lately, but I really do think the ninja choke is one of these new wrinkles where it's going to become a more popular submission at a high level here. And it's going to be used against people that are trying to grind them against the cage or on the ground. It's just such a good defensive submission move. And even the best fighters leave their neck open when they're trying to take you down. So happened to Holly Holm. Here it happened to Jonathan Pearce. Joanderson Brito is one of those freakishly strong guys where if you give him 2 arms around your neck, he's got a great chance of getting the job done. And Jonathan Pearce, deep into a fight that I thought he was completely taking over, he got submitted. He was forced to tap out in round 2, deep into round 2. This was a big surprise to me. I guess not the biggest, because I have a lot of respect for Joanderson Brito's finishing prowess. But I have a lot of respect for Jonathan Pearce's work rate and his pressure and his cardio. So for Joanderson Brito to get a deep second round ninja choke, this was a big surprise. And great win for Joanderson Brito. The guy, again, defied my expectations, and my estimation of him as a fighter definitely goes up here, big time. That brings me to Jose Johnson. Speaking of which, my estimation of him as a fighter goes up, with him being the first person to submit Chad Anhelger in, 8 years, something like that. But Chad Anhelger is a guy that started off his career getting submitted 5 times. And since then, he went on a 10-fight winning streak and then lost his last 2 now. But he's a guy that before this fight I considered almost impossible to finish. That's my estimation of this guy's grit and his toughness and submission defense as well, because that's a part of it. But here, Jose Johnson was able to outpoint him. I think he was on his way to winning a decision pretty comfortably just by securing top position more. But he wasn't looking to outpoint anybody. And deep into the fight, I forget how deep, but it was pretty damn deep. And he gets Chad Anhelger out of there. I think it's just seconds left or whatever, 10, 15, 20 seconds left. And he forced him to tap. Chad Anhelger was trying to make shit happen. He was scurrying, trying to, create space and reverse position, but Jose Johnson's jiu-jitsu was that good, where he was able to follow him, trap him, and choke him out with seconds left. Great win for Jose Johnson. Just like Joe Anderson Brito, my estimation of him as a fighter goes way up there. Winning deep down the stretch against a guy who thrives down the stretch. And for Chad Elger, he's a guy that, I don't want to say this brings back the 5 submission losses or whatever, but it does make him look a little more vulnerable nowadays. Although he's still got a great chin, and his chin held up against Jose Johnson, who's got bricks in his hands. But altogether, a great fight with a great finish for Jose Johnson. And Christian Leroy Duncan got a great finish against Dennis Tiuliulin. I know it's Tiuliulin or whatever, but I'll always say Tiuliulin. Dennis Tiuliulin took this fight on very short notice, very, very short notice, and stepped up and gave it a go, but he was overwhelmed pretty quickly by Christian Leroy Duncan. I thought he did a good job of making the fight close for a few minutes, Dennis. But after that and a little bit of offense, it was Christian's fight. Once they broke off from that clinch mid-round, Christian Leroy Duncan started working him with spinning attacks and wild shit and really just started beating him up from the outside, and Dennis was never allowed back into the fight. And in the end, he got him out of there with a nice combination. He hit him with so many strikes. It reminded me of like Nate Marquardt versus Wilson Govea, where it's like, yeah, he wasn't unconscious, but his body just couldn't handle it. He just physically couldn't handle that, and he had to crumble. And that's what Christian Leroy Duncan did to Dennis Tiuliulin. If you give this guy space, you're in trouble. And trying to go through him and finish him seems like a pretty tall order, too. It seems like against Christian Leroy Duncan, your best course of action is to slow the fight down and neutralize him. And be prepared to grind for 15 minutes. But great for Dennis Tiuliulin stepping in on short notice. That could be it for his UFC career, but I hope not, because he stepped up against a dangerous guy on very short notice. Kyle Machado versus Mick Parkin. Mick Parkin wins a decision, and I've got to be honest, I didn't agree with the decision. I thought Kyle Machado should have won the decision. I thought he narrowly won round 1 and 3, and I did think Mick Parkin definitively won round 2. So, you could argue Mick Parkin got the better of him overall, but I still thought Kyle Machado should have been given the nod there. I can't say that was a robbery, because again, the 2 rounds he won were close enough, but I can say it was not a good decision. Let's leave it at that. But still a fight that was not great, but a fight that showed us a little bit about both guys. I thought both guys fought hard for 15 minutes, but I really thought Kyle Machado was the last man standing. And I thought he was putting together some better strikes throughout the whole 15 minutes and down the stretch especially, and working some better kicks and some wild shit, some flying knee attempts and whatever, but really body work was the difference maker, I thought. I thought that slowed Mick Parkin down, took a good amount of wind out of his sails, and I thought they were just some of the best strikes of the night. But Mick Parkin was still thrown down to the end, and he landed some good right hands on Kyle Machado once he could, time his footwork. But I don't know. I don't know who has the brighter future between these two guys. They both seem durable enough. Again, Kyle Machado now is the only guy with losses, and he's got 2 of them. Never been finished, though. And he seems durable enough. Neither one seems like the most imposing fighter. And I still think my assessment of Mick Parkin, which is that he seems like a potentially better version of Josh Parisian, seems in line. I know some people have a lot higher estimation of him. But here I think, Kyle Machado brought out the worst in him. I thought this was a losing effort. I thought Kyle Machado won. And Mick Parkin, he's lucky to walk away with the victory, but still, he fought hard enough where he gave himself a shot, and he got the victory. I think it was unanimous as well. But it wasn't a robbery, it was a close enough fight. And that brings me to Jeka Saragih knocking out Lucas Alexander in round 1. This was one where, that is some fucking glare. This was one where I thought Jeka Saragih was, I can't say it was a fluke, but I'm going to intimate that. No, I thought Look, the guy's got power. He's definitely got knockout power, but he's fighting a bigger, stronger guy who had never been knocked out, in MMA anyway. And he caught him with some wild shit. They were on the ground, and Lucas, I think, was trying to lace up a leg, and Lucas got up, twirled around, left his arms down, and he got hit with a big hook right as he turned around, right on the button. That sent him flying, and that was pretty much it, even though he knocked him unconscious with a few extra shots. Great win for Jeka. This guy was really up against it in this fight. I was very sure he was going to be losing the striking battle. I had respect for his power, but I just didn't think it would be a factor here in this fight. And Lucas Alexander, you'll learn more about a fighter with each fight. And here now, certainly, I've got a lot more doubt about him as a fighter and about his chin and whatever, that fucking glare. But Jeka, he was up against it, I thought, physically in this fight, and he made shit happen. And off a ground exchange that wasn't going his way, he forced a brawl for a few seconds where he got in on Lucas Alexander and clipped his chin. And all it took was one, because apparently he's got some very serious power, and he's the first guy to knock out Lucas Alexander. Lucas Alexander's a guy who's only ever been submitted, and that's why I bet on Jeka by submission here, plus 2,200. I stand by it for a sprinkle. But knockout, he's got more knockouts than submissions anyway, Jeka. And here he shows that's just his thing. He's got some serious fucking power, and he put Lucas Alexander out. And I know I did suggest it was a fluke and whatever. I'm not. He's a guy that, I'll wait to see how his career goes, but he's just a guy that maybe makes shit happen like that. There are those type of fighters, and Lucas Alexander, maybe he gets knocked out in a few of his next fights, and that becomes a new weakness of his. So, who knows, remains to be seen to get the full context of this fight, but right now it's just a great victory for Jeka. He steamrolled a guy that I expected, not to steamroll him, but to win pretty comfortably. And he did so in the way I expected him to do, that I least expected him to do it. So, incredibly impressive win for Jeka. And for Lucas Alexander, yeah, there are some doubts moving forward about what happened here. That brings me to Eileen Perez versus Lucia Pudilova. And Eileen Perez, I thought, clearly won this fight, but it was still a close fight in the end. Kind of like Rafael Ramos Estevam versus Charles Johnson, which I'll get to in a few seconds. But same thing. One fighter won round 3 clearly after losing rounds 1 and 2 clearly. I thought Eileen Perez was all over Lucia Pudilova. I thought she was winning the wrestling battle and the grappling battle, advancing on her. But she wasn't able to put her away. And in the end, she survived when Lucia Pudilova almost put her away. And that round 3 was, became more dominant as the round went on, where I was actually thinking, this goes bad. The next 10 seconds, this could be a draw. But it was a 10-9 round, and Eileen Perez had done a great job dominating early on and survived down the stretch. So clear victory for Eileen Perez. And for Lucia Pudilova, she showed that grit. Again, even securing top position in the first place, but then making shit happen down the stretch. But it was too little too late. And she wasn't able to make the most of the position either to secure a 10-8 round. But she still threatened Eileen Perez, and Eileen Perez passed the test with flying colors. So good little battle there. And that brings me to Trey Ogden versus Nicholas Motta. I made a video on this separately where I broke down the fight and really bitched about the ref. And I'm going to do that here again. Now, I'm just going to say Mike Beltran fucked up. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking. He fucked up there, though. It was, and I'm forgivable when it comes to mistakes. And I always lend slack to the ref and whatever. But this was just a mistake. And it's got nothing to do with me having lost $17 on this fight. But I do think Trey Ogden looked great in this fight. I thought he was dominant. I thought he was dominant on the feet. I thought his jab was the story of the fight. He didn't throw a right hand, it seemed like, for the first 9 minutes of the fight. And that's because he respected the power of Nicholas Motta, and he wanted to keep himself safe, and especially when he was winning a safe fight very comfortably and safely. And he dominated Nicholas Motta, and in the end came very close to getting a finish. He locked up an arm triangle choke, and then the ref stopped it for no fucking reason, because Nicholas Motta was fighting it and couldn't stop fighting it to say, hey, I'm fighting it. I don't know. Either way, horrible stoppage, and the fight was ruled a no contest pretty quickly. First, it was ruled a submission victory for Trey Ogden. Then it was taken away and ruled a no contest. To be honest, a submission victory or technical submission victory is more fair. Technical meaning Nicholas Motta didn't tap, but it wasn't a submission victory. What makes it fair is that Trey Ogden was going to win that fight, but Nicholas Motta was not going to tap. So it was just an all-around screw job. I thought both guys should have been pissed, and they were pissed about what happened there. Nicholas Motta was instantly protesting, and I think Mike Beltran must have realized pretty quickly how badly he fucked that one up. And Trey Ogden was celebrating instantly, initially, and then he started fuming, I'm sure, after that, because he was denied a victory with the no contest. So overall, a shit fest, and yeah, these things happen in MMA, as Gus Johnson famously said. Rafael Ramos Estevam versus Charles Johnson. This was kind of like Eileen Perez versus Lucia Pudilova, broadly speaking, when one fighter wins rounds 1 and 2 and then loses round 3. I thought Rafael Estevam was really good at getting Charles Johnson to the ground. He was doing it judo-wise, tossing him to the mat early on, and he was also using chain wrestling as well, and seemed to be really good at controlling Charles and securing position on the ground. But Charles Johnson is almost impossible to finish. Again, go watch his fight against Brandon Royval. But he is a guy that has a lot of grit as well. Go watch his fight against Brandon Royval. And he was taking over the fight in round 3. I did think his wrestling defense was shining in round 3. I know he defended a lot of takedowns, but it's the fight that I expected more from him, where he was leading the dance on the feet, and he really was leading the dance, striking well from the outside, but also crowding Estevam against the cage and elbowing him inside, in between mixing in body shots. He was fighting like a hungry Diaz brother, and it still wasn't enough. He couldn't secure a 10-8 round by hurting Estevam, and he couldn't take away rounds 1 and 2, which were defeats. And Estevam, say what you will about him as a fighter, he missed weight here, which makes this type of win specifically look extra shitty, and it was a shitty win. But he still had enough grappling prowess and takedown prowess in the first place to win this fight and get a win over now what I can comfortably say is an underrated UFC fighter, or maybe ex-UFC fighter. Remains to be seen. But Charles Johnson, yeah, he is definitely a guy with a particular weakness, much like the Diaz brothers and the Aguirre brothers and Carlos Condit and whoever the fuck else, anybody else that's ever been, one of those anti-wrestlers. They're susceptible to being out-wrestled. And Charles Johnson is susceptible to being out-wrestled. It's just his weakness. And here it was on full display. It was the reason for this loss. He shined down the stretch and looked really good in round 3, but nobody's going to remember that because it's going down on paper as an L. I don't know if he's got a future here, but here he was fighting a guy that missed weight, which again is a benefit in a lot of different ways, especially in a fight like this. But still, that's not going to be remembered either. That's not even an asterisk on the record. It's just a loss. So he's got to work on his wrestling defense, and if he's lucky enough to be given another shot, I'm sure that's what his opponent's going to be trying to do to him. And for Rafael Ramos Estevam, you got to make weight. You can't make weight and then fight like that. That was not a very inspiring look for a debut. But still, he's a guy that's a solid finisher, and a versatile guy. And here he showed he has the overall wherewithal to fight a boring fight when the spotlight's on him and he's the first fight of the night in his UFC debut. And he neutralized a guy that needs to be neutralized in Charles Johnson. So there's that. But yeah, he's got a lot of shit to make up for. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.